My parents kicked me out for getting a job and not being able to babysit anymore, then lied to the whole family when asked about it. So I went nuclear and exposed them, and now they're trying to force me back because their new babysitter quit. 2 months after I turned 17, I got my first job. But when I told my parents about it, their literal first words were, "Who's going to babysit our kids?" I should have been shocked, but because I knew my parents, I wasn't. So I replied, "Well, who's going to pay for my college tuition?" I expected that to stump them. You see, they had repeatedly told me in the past if I wanted to go to college, I needed to pay for it myself. But instead of conceding, they started laughing like my response was the funniest thing in the world. You're a woman, and women should be grateful to take care of kids, whether it's free or paid. Of course, in my case, it was free. My dad then chimed in with some words of wisdom. "You don't just get to be selfish and abandon the family, Julia. Do you know how much a babysitter for 4 kids costs these days?" I tried to compromise, to tell them that some of the money I made from work could go to them and the kids, but they didn't care. And to them, because I wasn't spending my life taking care of their kids, I deserved to be kicked out. They told me to pack my bags and leave. I just rolled my eyes in response. I ran upstairs, but as I did, for the first time in a very long time, I let myself feel it, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and most of all, the grief of knowing I'll never know a life where my parents love me. I didn't even bother wiping the tears away, just focused on stuffing as many clothes into a backpack as possible. After 10 minutes, they yelled at me to hurry up, and that's when we left for my cousins. On the way there, my parents kept trying to change my mind. My dad reminded me of how much my siblings loved me, or more specifically, how no one else could get them to stop crying like I can. Their manipulation wasn't even that good, but for some reason, I still felt bad. I started questioning if I really was selfish. My mom even started crying, not because she'd miss me, but because now they had to pay for a babysitter. So when we arrived at my cousin Megan's and they just drove off without saying goodbye, I felt even more guilt, especially when she opened the door, because her face immediately lit up with joy, and she gave me the first genuine smile I'd seen in a long time. Kindness felt so unfamiliar to me that as soon as we got inside, I immediately broke down in tears. Her face fell and she tried to console me. "Well, kinda. My love, why don't you just help your parents out a little?" Help? I've cut off friends, let my grades drop, sacrificed everything to constantly take care of their kids. I didn't mean to shout, but I couldn't help the anger inside me. I turned to face her with disgust at her suggestion, but that's when I saw a look of genuine shock on her face. "Your parents told me you were acting entitled and just didn't want to help out when you had nothing to do all day." I immediately started crying again, but this time it was in her arms. I told her the whole truth, why I ended up at her place, all while she held me and told me I would be safe under her roof. Surprisingly, she seemed anything but angry, but I would soon find out she was more than just angry. I ended up crying myself to sleep that afternoon. I didn't wake up until a few hours later when I heard Megan yelling. It was in the room next door. When I heard the anger in her voice, I sat up immediately. She was usually a very shy, timid person, so hearing her like this was super unusual. It was obvious that she was talking to my parents. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I could tell she was laying it on them. I remember feeling a genuine smile creep onto my face. It was the first time someone had stood up for me. When I heard her hang up, I lay back down and pretended to still be asleep. Not knowing I was awake, she started speaking out loud, something Megan hasn't done since I was a kid, but what she said made me shoot up. Apparently, my parents had already found a new free babysitter. They had one available all along. This whole thing was just a ploy to kick me out of the house and get me out of the hair once and for all. After saying all this, Megan sighed and said I deserved better before heading to bed. And that's when I sat up, because she was right. I did deserve better parents. And if I couldn't get it, then I at least deserved to have my get back. My plan was bulletproof. You know that one gossipy aunt every family has? Well, we have one too. And I texted her every tiny little juicy detail of everything that happened between me and my family. It ended up being a 1,400-word message. I immediately turned my phone off because I was terrified of the consequences. And the next morning, when I finally felt brave enough to turn it back on, my soul left my body. My phone was blowing up with notifications, not just texts from my gossipy Aunt Barbara, but from pretty much every family member I had contact info for. Apparently, Aunt Barbara had taken my 1,400-word text and forwarded it to everyone in the family group chat without a moment's hesitation. I scrolled through the messages with my heart pounding in my chest. There were dozens of them. Some people were defending my parents, saying I was just a dramatic teenager, but a surprising number were actually on my side. My Uncle Joseph wrote a whole paragraph about how disgusted he was with his sister, my mom, for treating me like a live-in nanny instead of a daughter. My grandma Elizabeth sent a message saying she was heartbroken and that she raised her children better than this. Megan came into the guest room where I was staying and sat down next to me on the bed. She had her phone in her hand too. Megan snorted. "Are you kidding? Barbara lives for this kind of drama, but honestly, maybe it's good that everyone knows what's been going on." I wasn't so sure about that. On one hand, it felt good to finally have people believe me. On the other hand, I knew my parents were going to be furious, and I still had to figure out what I was going to do now. I had a job, but no place to live long term. I was still in high school, and despite everything, I missed my little siblings terribly. My phone rang. It was my dad calling. I looked at Megan, panic rising in my chest and my hands starting to shake slightly, but I knew I had to face them eventually. I took a deep breath and hit the accept button. I answered the call, bracing for the inevitable explosion. I wasn't disappointed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My dad's voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Megan could hear it too, and her eyes widened. I didn't even get a chance to respond before he continued his rant. He told me I was dead to him, that I'd humiliated them in front of the entire family, and that I could forget about ever coming home. The whole time I just sat there taking it, my eyes filling with tears again. When he finally ran out of steam, I managed to squeak out, "I didn't mean for Aunt Barbara to tell everyone." It was a weak response, but it was all I could come up with. "You stupid, ungrateful," he started again, but then I heard my mom in the background. She snatched the phone from him. Her voice was ice cold when she spoke. "Julia, you've made your choice. Don't expect any support from us moving forward. Not for college, not for your phone bill, nothing." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even thought about all those practical things. My phone was still on their family plan. I had been counting on them at least helping with college. "What about my stuff?" I asked, my voice small. "You took what you needed," my mom replied. "Anything else we'll donate if you don't arrange to pick it up by the weekend." The call ended abruptly. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling completely overwhelmed. Megan put her arm around me and gave me a squeeze. "Well, that sounded pleasant," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "Don't worry about your stuff. We'll go get it tomorrow while they're at work." I nodded, still in shock. My parents had basically just disowned me over a part-time job at a coffee shop. What kind of parents did that? The next day, Megan called in sick to work, and we drove over to my parents' house. I still had my key, so we could get in without any problems. The house was quiet. My parents were at work, and my siblings were at school and daycare. It felt weird being back so soon, like I was breaking in instead of coming home. I quickly went to my room and started gathering things I hadn't been able to fit in my backpack the first time. My favorite books, more clothes, my laptop, and some photos of my siblings that I kept on my desk. While I was packing, Megan was in my parents' home office. I didn't know what she was doing, but I was focused on getting my stuff and getting out before anyone came home unexpectedly. When we left, Megan had a folder tucked under her arm. I asked her what it was, and she just shrugged and said she'd tell me later. We loaded my stuff into her car and drove back to her apartment. Back at her place, Megan finally showed me what she'd taken. It was a folder with my birth certificate, social security card, and some other important documents. She had also grabbed my parents' spare credit card that they kept for emergencies. "You're going to need these," she explained, "and they owe you for all the free babysitting." I was shocked. "We can't use their credit card. That's stealing." Megan rolled her eyes. "Relax. We're not going on a shopping spree, but you need clothes for work, a new phone plan, and some basic necessities. They owe you at least that much." I wasn't comfortable with it, but I also didn't see many options. I had $50 to my name and wouldn't get my first paycheck for 2 weeks. So I reluctantly agreed to use the card, but only for things I absolutely needed. We went to the mall that afternoon. I got a few black t-shirts and pants for my coffee shop job, a cheap prepaid phone, and some toiletries. All in all, we spent about $200 on the card. Still, I felt guilty about it, even though Megan assured me it was nothing compared to what a real babysitter would have cost them over the years. The next day was my first shift at the coffee shop. I was nervous but excited to start earning my own money. The shop was called The Daily Grind. Super original, I know. The manager, Jamie, was pretty cool and patient with my training. I messed up a few orders and struggled with the espresso machine, but overall it wasn't too bad. When I got back to Megan's after my shift, I had 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I hesitated before calling back, worried it might be my parents from a different phone. It wasn't. It was my little sister Emma using my brother's iPad. She was only 10 but somehow managed to memorize my number. She was crying, asking why I left and when I was coming home. It broke my heart to hear her so upset. I tried to explain in a way she would understand without bad-mouthing our parents. I told her I had a job now and needed to live closer to work, that I still loved her and my other siblings very much. She didn't really get it, but she made me promise to come see her soon. I promised, even though I had no idea how I would manage it. After that call, I was a mess again. Megan suggested we order pizza and watch dumb movies to take my mind off everything. It helped a little, but I couldn't stop thinking about my siblings and how much I missed them. The next few days fell into a routine. I would go to work, come back to Megan's, do homework, and repeat. I was exhausted all the time from trying to keep up with school while working nearly every day after classes, but at least I was making money now. About a week after everything went down, I got a text from my Aunt Barbara asking if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner at her house. She mentioned that my grandparents would be there, along with some other relatives who wanted to see me. I was hesitant. Was this some kind of trap? But Megan thought it would be good for me to see family who were supportive. So that Sunday, Megan drove me to Aunt Barbara's house. As soon as we walked in, my grandmother rushed over and pulled me into a tight hug. She was crying, which made me start crying too. I hadn't realized how much I needed a grandmother hug until that moment. The dinner was actually nice. No one pressured me to talk about my parents, but they made it clear they were there for me. My grandfather even slipped me an envelope before we left. When I opened it in the car, I found 5 crisp $100 $500 bills inside. I tried to call him to say it was too much, but he wouldn't take it back. He said it was to help me get on my feet. That money was a huge relief. I immediately used some of it to get off my parents' phone plan and onto my own. I also opened a bank account without my parents' names on it, something Megan had suggested. Things were looking up, until they suddenly weren't. 2 weeks after I moved in with Megan, I came home from school to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a serious look on her face. "We need to talk," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. My heart sank. Was she kicking me out too? Where would I go? "Your mom called me today," Megan continued. "They've noticed the charges on their emergency credit card." I felt sick. I should have known they would check the statements or get a purchase alert. What appeared to be a spare card was actually one they monitored regularly. "What did she say?" I asked. "She accused us of theft and threatened to call the police if we don't return the card and pay back every cent," Megan replied with a grimace. "But here's the kicker. She also wants you to come home." I was shocked. "What? Why would they want me back after everything that happened?" Megan's expression turned grim. "Because their new babysitter quit after just 1 week. Apparently 4 kids under 10 is too much for most people. Who knew?" I laughed bitterly. Of course that was the reason. They didn't miss me. They missed their free childcare. "I'm not going back," I said firmly. "I can pay them back for the card from my paychecks, but I'm not going back to being their slave." Megan nodded, looking relieved. "That's what I told them. But they're pretty upset about the money. Your mom mentioned something about small claims court." I felt a flash of panic. Could they really take us to court? Would we get in trouble? I still had most of the $500 from my grandfather, so I could pay them back right away, but the whole thing left me feeling anxious and angry. The next day at school was awful. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept imagining police showing up to arrest me for credit card fraud or something. By lunchtime, I was a nervous wreck. My friend Casey noticed something was wrong and dragged me outside to the courtyard to talk. I ended up telling her everything. She was horrified by what my parents had done. "That's actual child neglect," she said. "They can't just throw you out because you got a job. You're still a minor." I hadn't really thought about it that way. I was so used to being treated like an adult at home that I forgot I was still legally a child. Casey's mom was a lawyer, and she suggested I talk to her about my options. I was hesitant. I didn't want to drag more people into my family drama, but Casey insisted, and after school she took me to her house. Mrs. Thompson, Casey's mom, listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I finished, she had a lot of questions about specifics, dates, exactly what was said, who else knew about the situation. I answered as best I could. "Julia, what your parents did is not okay," she said finally. "They're legally obligated to provide for you until you're 18. They can't just kick you out because you won't babysit." She explained that I had options. I could file for emancipation, which would legally make me an adult before turning 18, or we could report my parents to Child Protective Services, which might force them to take me back or place me in foster care. Neither option sounded great. Emancipation would mean taking on full adult responsibilities when I was already struggling to balance school and work. And CPS might take my siblings away too, which I definitely didn't want. Mrs. Thompson must have seen my hesitation. She suggested a third option, having another relative petition for temporary guardianship. That way, I could legally stay with someone like Megan or my grandparents without my parents getting in trouble. I thanked her for the advice and promised to think about it. On the way back to Megan's, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was my little brother Alex, using my dad's old phone. He said my parents were fighting all the time now, and the house was a mess without me there. My heart ached reading his messages. I missed him and my other siblings so much. When I got back to Megan's, I had a surprise waiting for me. My grandparents were there, sitting in the living room with serious expressions. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened. "Don't look so worried," my grandmother said, patting the couch next to her. "We just want to talk about what happens next." They had heard about the credit card situation from my mom, but unlike my parents, they weren't angry. They were concerned. They thought I shouldn't be working so much while trying to finish high school. They wanted me to focus on my education. My grandfather cleared his throat. "We have a proposal for you. We'd like you to come live with us until you graduate. We have plenty of room, and you won't have to work so many hours to support yourself." I was stunned. My grandparents lived in a nice house about 30 minutes from my school. Moving in with them would solve so many problems, but I was worried about imposing on them. They were in their 70s and probably didn't want a teenager disrupting their retirement. "We've already discussed it with your parents," my grandmother added, seeing my hesitation. "They've agreed, as long as you visit them and the kids every weekend." Of course they had a condition. They still wanted access to my free babysitting services, but 1 day a week was a lot better than every day. And living with my grandparents would be a huge improvement over couch surfing at Megan's, as much as I appreciated her taking me in. So I agreed. That weekend, I moved my stuff to my grandparents' house. They had converted their home office into a bedroom for me. It was small but cozy, with a twin bed, a desk, and a bookshelf. My grandmother had even bought new bedding and curtains to make it feel like my own space. The first night there, I slept better than I had in weeks. There was something calming about being in their house, away from the chaos of my parents' home, but still with family who cared about me. The next morning was Saturday, which meant I had to face my first visitation with my parents and siblings. My grandmother drove me over, promising to pick me up at 6 p.m. sharp. I was was nervous the entire ride over. When we pulled up to my parents' house, my siblings came running out the front door. Emma launched herself into my arms, and the younger ones crowded around me, all talking at once. I hugged them tightly, realizing how much I had missed their little faces. My parents were standing in the doorway, watching. My mom's expression was unreadable, but my dad looked annoyed, probably because he had to deal with the kids all morning until I arrived. Once my grandmother left, I spent the day playing with my siblings, helping them with homework, and catching up on their lives. It was almost like old times, except for the tension whenever my parents were in the room. My mom eventually cornered me in the kitchen while I was making lunch for the kids. "So, you're too good to live here anymore, but you'll take handouts from your grandparents?" she said with a sneer. I tried to stay calm. "I'm just trying to finish high school without being homeless," I replied, focusing on making sandwiches rather than looking at her. "You were never going to be homeless," she scoffed. "You're so dramatic." I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that they were the ones who kicked me out. Instead, I just carried the plates of food to the dining room for my siblings. The rest of the day was awkward but manageable. My dad mostly ignored me, which was fine by me. At 6 p.m. exactly, my grandmother's car pulled up outside. I hugged my siblings goodbye, promising to return next weekend. As I was walking out the door, my mom called after me. "Don't forget to bring your babysitting money next time." I turned, confused. "What babysitting money?" She rolled her eyes. "The $500 you owe us for stealing our credit card." I was about to argue but decided it wasn't worth it. I just nodded and left. In the car, I told my grandmother what happened. She looked angry but didn't say anything until we were halfway home. "Your mother always did have a selective memory," she finally said. "She seems to have forgotten all the money they saved using you as a nanny for 5 years." I was surprised. My grandmother had never criticized my parents in front of me before. It felt good to have someone else see the unfairness of the situation. Life at my grandparents' house quickly fell into a new routine. I went to school, worked fewer shifts at the coffee shop, and spent more time on homework. My grades started improving almost immediately. On weekends, I visited my siblings as agreed, though I dreaded the interactions with my parents. The credit card issue was resolved when my grandfather insisted on paying it off himself, saying it was worth every penny to get me out of that toxic environment. I promised to pay him back, but he waved away my concerns. A month after moving in with my grandparents, I got some unexpected news at school. My English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, asked me to stay after class. She showed me an essay I'd written about family dynamics and told me it was one of the best pieces she'd read from a student. "Have you thought about applying for college scholarships?" she asked. "With your writing skills and grades, you could qualify for some good ones." I admitted I hadn't really been thinking about college lately, given everything going on in my personal life. Mrs. Rodriguez gave me information about several scholarship opportunities specifically for students who had overcome adversity. She even offered to help with my applications. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about my future. I started researching colleges and scholarships with renewed enthusiasm. My grandparents were supportive, helping me navigate the applications and even taking me on campus tours to a few nearby universities. My parents, however, were less than thrilled when they found out. During one of my weekend visits, my dad saw me working on a scholarship essay on my laptop. "College?" he scoffed. "What a waste of money. You should be saving up to get your own place instead of mooching off your grandparents." I ignored him and kept typing. This just made him angrier. "You know we're not paying for any of it, right?" he said. "Not a single penny." I looked up at him calmly. "I know. I'm applying for scholarships and financial aid." He seemed disappointed that his statement hadn't upset me more. He walked away muttering something about ungrateful kids thinking they're too good for honest work. The scholarship applications took up most of my free time for weeks. Mrs. Rodriguez reviewed my essays, and my grandparents helped me gather all the required documents. By the spring, I had submitted applications to 6 different colleges and over a dozen scholarship programs. The first acceptance letter came on a Tuesday in April. I got into State University with a partial scholarship. I was thrilled, but it still wasn't enough to cover all the costs. I kept hoping for better news from the other schools. That same week, something unexpected happened during my weekend visit to my parents' house. My mom actually asked me how the college applications were going. It was the first time she'd shown any interest in my future plans. I told her about the acceptance from State, trying not to sound too excited since I knew she didn't approve. To my surprise, she didn't make any snide comments. Instead, she nodded and said, "Your Aunt Barbara went there. She liked it." It wasn't much, but it was the closest thing to support I'd gotten from either of my parents in months. I decided to take it as a positive sign. The next big news came 2 weeks later. I received an email notification that changed everything. One of the national merit scholarships I'd applied for had selected me as a finalist. If I won, it would cover full tuition at any public university in the state for 4 years. I was ecstatic. My grandparents took me out to dinner to celebrate making it to the finals. Even Megan drove over to join us. The finalist interview was scheduled for the following week. I spent days preparing for that interview. My grandmother helped me pick out a professional outfit, a navy blue blazer and skirt that made me look older than 17. My grandfather drilled me with practice questions until I could answer confidently about my goals and aspirations. The day of the interview, I was a nervous wreck. The scholarship committee consisted of 5 people, all with impressive academic credentials. They asked about my essay, my experiences, and my plans for the future. I talked about wanting to become a child psychologist, inspired partly by my own experiences with family dynamics. I left the interview feeling like I'd done my best, but I had no idea if it was good enough. The results wouldn't be announced for another 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I checked my email obsessively, jumping every time my phone made a notification sound. My grandparents kept telling me to relax, that whatever happened, we would figure something out. But I knew how much that scholarship would change my life. Meanwhile, things with my parents remained complicated. During my weekend visits, I noticed my mom was making more of an effort to be civil, even asking about school occasionally. My dad was still distant, but at least he wasn't actively antagonistic anymore. My siblings, of course, were always happy to see me. Emma had started calling me every few days just to chat, which I loved. The younger ones would fight over who got to sit next to me or show me their drawings first when I visited. Those moments made the awkwardness with my parents worth it. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the email arrived. I was at my grandparents' house doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone pinged with a notification. The subject line read, National Merit Scholarship, Decision. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the email. My grandmother noticed and came to stand behind me, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder. I took a deep breath and tapped the notification. The email loaded, and I quickly scanned the first paragraph, my heart racing. Congratulations. I didn't even need to read the rest. I had won. Full tuition for 4 years at any public university in the state. I burst into tears, a mix of relief and joy washing over me. My grandmother hugged me tightly, also crying. My grandfather came in from the garage to see what all the commotion was about, and soon he was celebrating too. That evening, we had an impromptu party. Megan came over with a cake, and Casey stopped by with balloons. Even Mrs. Rodriguez made an appearance with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal for my college years. In all the excitement, I almost forgot to tell my parents. I called them that night, nervous about their reaction but wanting to share my news. My mom answered the phone. I told her about the scholarship, trying to keep my voice neutral despite my excitement. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, she finally said, I guess all that studying paid off. It wasn't exactly enthusiastic, but it wasn't negative either. I decided to take it as a win. Does this mean you're definitely moving away for college? She asked next. I explained that I was still deciding between schools, but yes, I would likely be living on campus somewhere. There was another pause. The kids will miss you, she said. And then, so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. We all will. It was the closest thing to an admission that they cared about me that I'd heard in years. I didn't know how to respond, so I just thanked her and said I'd see them on the weekend as usual. After that call, I sat on my bed for a long time, thinking about how much had changed in just a few months. I'd gone from being my parents' live-in nanny to living with my grandparents and winning a full scholarship to college. It wasn't the path I had expected my life to take, but maybe it was the one I needed. The next day at school, I found myself smiling for no reason throughout the day. The future that had seemed so bleak just months ago now looked bright and full of possibilities. I had people who believed in me and supported my dreams, and I was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I deserved that support all along. As April turned to May, things kept looking up. I spent most of my time at my grandparents' place, which honestly felt more like home than my parents' house ever did. I still went over every weekend to see my siblings, but those visits got less awkward as time passed. My mom actually started making small talk with me, and my dad at least stopped glaring at me from across the room. One Saturday in mid-May, something weird happened. I was playing with my youngest brother in the living room when my mom came in and just stood there watching us. After a few minutes, she cleared her throat. Julia, can we talk in the kitchen for a minute? My stomach immediately knotted up. Every time my parents wanted to talk, it ended with me feeling like crap. But I nodded and followed her. In the kitchen, she busied herself making coffee, not looking at me. I just stood there awkwardly, waiting for whatever bomb she was about to drop. Your father and I have been talking, she finally said, about your graduation next month. Oh right, graduation. With everything else going on, I'd barely thought about it. But now that she mentioned it, I realized I had no idea who would come to the ceremony. Would my parents even show up? Would it be super awkward having them and my grandparents in the same place? We want to host a small party for you, she continued, here at the house. After the ceremony, I must have looked completely shocked because she actually laughed a little. Don't look so surprised. You're still our daughter. I didn't know what to say. For months, they'd treated me like I was nothing but free labor, and now they wanted to throw me a graduation party? It didn't make sense. Why? I blurted out before I could stop myself. My mom's face fell a little. She put down her coffee cup and finally looked directly at me. Because we're proud of you, she said quietly. The scholarship, college. You've done well, Julia. I just stared at her. Who was this woman and what had she done with my mother? I wanted to ask if she was feeling okay, or if she'd been abducted by aliens. Before I could respond, my dad walked in. He nodded at me awkwardly, then grabbed a beer from the fridge. Your mom tell you about the party? He asked. I nodded, still too confused to form words. Good, he said. We were thinking just family. Your grandparents? Megan? A few few aunts and uncles. They were including my grandparents and Megan, the people who had basically rescued me from them. This was getting weirder by the minute. That sounds nice, I managed to say. Thank you. My dad nodded again and left the kitchen. My mom went back to fussing with coffee cups. I escaped back to the living room as soon as I could, my head spinning. That night at my grandparents' house, I told them about the party offer. My grandmother got a weird look on her face. Your Aunt Barbara went to visit them last week, she said. Had a long talk with your mother, apparently. That explained some things. Aunt Barbara was my mom's older sister and pretty much the only person my mom would actually listen to. If Barbara had called her out on her treatment of me, it might have gotten through to her in a way that no one else could. So, should I let them throw this party? I asked. Or is it some kind of trap? My grandfather chuckled. Not everything is a trap, Julia. Sometimes people just realize they've made mistakes and want to fix them. I wasn't so sure about that, but I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. I texted my mom the next day saying I'd like to have the party. She sent back a thumbs up emoji, which was probably the most enthusiastic response I'd ever gotten from her. The next few weeks flew by with finals and graduation preparations. I was ranked 12th in my class, which meant I'd get to wear one of those fancy honor cords with my cap and gown. My grandparents were so proud they took me shopping for a new dress to wear under my gown. Casey and I spent a whole Saturday decorating our caps. I put, "Nevertheless," she persisted, on mine with glittery gold letters. It felt appropriate given everything I'd been through. Graduation day arrived with perfect June weather. I woke up early, too excited and nervous to sleep in. My grandmother made her special blueberry pancakes for breakfast, and my grandfather kept taking photos of me like I was a toddler heading off to my first day of kindergarten. The ceremony was at 2 p.m. When we arrived at the school, the parking lot was already packed with families carrying balloons and flowers. I spotted my parents' car right away. It was hard to miss with all 4 of my siblings' faces pressed against the windows, waving frantically at me. I waved back, feeling a weird mix of emotions. Part of me was still angry about everything they'd done, but another part was just glad they'd shown up. I had to go line up with the other graduates while my family found seats in the auditorium. Casey found me in line and we took selfies with our decorated caps. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was watching myself in a movie about high school graduation rather than actually experiencing it. The ceremony itself was pretty standard. Boring speeches from the principal and valedictorian, the band playing Pomp and Circumstance on an endless loop as we walked across the stage. When they called my name, I heard cheering from multiple sections of the audience. My siblings were the loudest, of course, but I could also pick out Megan's voice and my grandfather's distinctive whistle. Afterward, in the chaos of families finding their graduates, I got caught in a whirlwind of hugs and photos. Emma wouldn't let go of my waist, and my littlest brother kept trying to steal my cap. My parents actually looked proud, my dad patting me on the back and my mom fussing with my hair for pictures. As we were walking to the parking lot, Casey ran up to give me one last hug. "Coming to Tyler's party tonight?" she asked. I shook my head. "Family thing," I said, nodding toward my parents. "Maybe I can stop by later?" She shrugged. "Text me if you escape," she said with a wink before running off to join her own family. We all caravanned back to my parents' house, my parents' car full of my siblings, my grandparents in their car, and me riding with Megan. As we drove, Megan kept glancing at me. "You okay?" she finally asked. I nodded. "Just weird, you know? A few months ago they kicked me out, and now they're throwing me a graduation party." Megan smiled. "People can surprise you sometimes, not always in bad ways." When we got to the house, I was shocked to see balloons tied to the mailbox and a "Congratulations Graduate" banner hanging over the front door. Inside, the dining room table was covered with food, and there was even a cake with my name on it. More relatives arrived. Aunt Barbara, who hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Uncle Joseph. A few cousins I hadn't seen in ages. Even Mrs. Thompson, Casey's mom who had given me legal advice, stopped by with a gift card. The party was actually fun. My siblings were on their best behavior, my parents were being weirdly nice, and everyone kept telling me how proud they were of me. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to mention babysitting or for my dad to make some snide comment about college being a waste of time. But it never happened. After cake, my mom announced it was time for gifts. There were the usual graduation presents, money, gift cards, a new laptop from my grandparents that I nearly cried over. But then my parents handed me a small box. Inside was a key. I looked at them, confused. "It's to our house," my mom explained. "We want you to know you always have a home here, even when you're away at college." I just stared at the key, completely speechless. My dad cleared his throat. We didn't handle things well," he said awkwardly, "when you got that job. We were wrong to kick you out." Was this really happening? Was my dad actually admitting they were wrong? I looked around to see if anyone else was as shocked as I was, but everyone was just smiling like this was totally normal. "Your Aunt Barbara reminded us that parents are supposed to support their children, not the other way around," my mom added. "We took advantage of you, Julia, and we're sorry." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. An actual apology from my parents. I half expected the ceiling to cave in or for aliens to suddenly invade. We're also sorry about the babysitting, my dad said. We've hired a real babysitter now, for when you're not here. I looked at my grandparents, who were beaming with pride. My grandmother gave me an encouraging nod. Thank you, I finally managed to say. That means a lot. The rest of the party passed in a blur. By the time everyone left, it was almost 9 p.m. I texted Casey that I wouldn't make it to Tyler's party after all. I was too emotionally drained to handle a high school rager. My grandparents were the last to leave. As they were heading out, my grandmother pulled me aside. Your parents called us last week, she said quietly. They wanted to know if we'd help them with your college expenses, whatever the scholarship doesn't cover. I was stunned all over again. They did? She nodded. People can change, Julia. Sometimes they just need a wake-up call. After everyone left, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my parents. There was an awkward silence as we all avoided eye contact. So, my mom finally said, you're all set for State University in August? I nodded. Yeah, orientation is in July. I got assigned to Thompson Hall. That's on the north side of campus, right? My dad asked. Near the library? I was surprised he knew that. Yeah, it is. How did you know? He shrugged. I looked it up. Wanted to know where you'd be living. We fell into another silence, but it felt less awkward this time. More like we were all just adjusting to this new normal. You know, my mom said hesitantly, if you wanted to move back home for the summer, there's room. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to say no immediately, but another part recognized that they were trying, in their own awkward way, to make amends. I'll think about it, I said. I promised Grandma I'd help her with her garden this summer, but maybe I could split my time. They both nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. My dad checked his watch. It's getting late. Do you want us to drive you back to your grandparents? I shook my head. Megan's coming back to get me in a few minutes. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Megan saying she was on her way. I started gathering my graduation gifts. Leave some of it here if you want, my mom suggested, for when you visit. When Megan's car pulled up outside, my parents walked me to the door. My mom surprised me with a hug, and my dad awkwardly patted my shoulder. Congratulations again, my mom said. We really are proud of you. As Megan drove me back to my grandparents' house, I thought about how much had changed in just a few months. I'd gone from being a free nanny who wasn't allowed to have a job to a soon-to-be college student with a full scholarship. I'd found out who really had my back when things got tough, and I'd learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. But most surprisingly, I'd learned that sometimes people can actually change. My parents weren't perfect, not even close, but they were trying. And for now, that was enough. I looked down at the house key in my hand. Maybe I would spend some time at home this summer after all. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to, on my own terms. And that made all the difference.